Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name's Dr. Sharon Scambry, and I'm here today to talk about international business. We're working from the Charles Hill 2021 text, and today we're focused on Chapter 16. Chapter 16 is all about exporting, importing, and countertrade. So let's share the screen here and we'll get going. Okay, so we've got 5 learning objectives. We're going to explain the promises and risks associated with exporting. We're going to identify the steps that managers can take to improve their export performance. We're going to look at the basic steps involved with export transactions and identify information sources that can help exporters. And then we end the chapter with describing how countertrade can facilitate exports. Okay, so there's lots of hyperlinks all throughout this presentation, and I'll leave those for you to explore. The first hyperlink there is a data portal on exporting provided by the World Trade Organization. So all sorts of parameters that you can search there. Anyway, right, so exporting is about more than 90% of all companies are engaged in global market export. And why is that so high a percentage? Is because exporting is a relatively low commitment, low risk, and low investment level to achieve foreign expansion. So because of that, many small and medium-sized organizations engage in exporting. So increased volume of exporting is facilitated by the reduced trade and investment barriers and the increase in regional economic agreements, such as is the case across the European Union. As well as reduced trade barriers and increased regional agreements, the advances in technology and communication mechanisms have also facilitated increased exporting. Now, it can be intimidating for some organizations, but there's lots of help out there. All right, so to recognize whether or not you're ready to export, you need to consider whether or not your product is ready to be exported and whether or not your company has the system set up to achieve the exporting. And same with regards if you're looking at importing. Is your product is the product that you're looking to import ready to be imported? And is your organization ready to conduct the import? Now, there's much promise with exporting, but of course there are challenges, pitfalls as well that we want to avoid. There's large revenue and profit opportunities available in foreign markets, and this is a reason why organizations take on the challenge of exporting. Another reason that they take on the challenge of exporting is because it enables them to achieve economies of scale. Large organizations tend to be very proactive about exporting, whereas small and medium-sized organizations tend to be more reactive. And so what happens is that you might venture into the foreign market without enough knowledge, unfortunately. And so you might run into problems. And then, you know, once bitten, twice shy, then you might be intimidated to try it again later down the track. So a big impediment to exporting is simply this lack of knowledge. And so it comes back to principle that I keep repeating, and that is do your homework. You need to be very familiar with the market. You need to understand how that foreign market operates. You need to recognize that venturing into foreign markets, you're going to be competing with other countries that possibly are more adept in international trade. Japan, for example, the Shosha in Japan are about these big 5 trading houses: Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo, Itochu, and Marubeni. And I've given you some links there that can help you understand, but basically the Sogashoshas are general trading houses that cover a lot of territory. That, you know, Japan, because it's such a small country, it has to engage in international trade, and they've done so for a very long time. So they're very experienced at this. And we can learn from them. Okay, so here's some information sources, including the US Department of Commerce. So they have dedicated information and teams of people that can help you in this exporting endeavor. Another government agency is the International Trade Administration, and they actually operate district export councils, so regional specific. And the Small Business Administration is another government agency that is very well equipped to help your business conduct export. There's also business education and research centres around the country that are located within various institutions. You can also employ service providers to help you with your exporting. You can talk to freight forwarders and enter contracts so that your smaller shipments can be put in with larger shipments to minimize your costs. Freight forwarders can also help you with documentation and payment processes. You can hire export management companies, and I've given you a link there to the Better Business Bureau, so you can ensure that the export management organization that you're hiring is indeed got an excellent, maybe a AAA, maybe an A+ BBB rating. And there's also export organizations that can comprehensively help you with regards to your export adventures. Packaging is another concern because, of course, there's country-specific requirements. And then because we're talking about international borders, custom brokers need to get involved. And there's the hyperlink I've given you there is to a government website. On the ground in the host country, you can engage with buying agents. Okay, so the picture on the right there is a picture and a hyperlink with regards to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a foreign trade zone, a free trade zone, and specifically designed to facilitate the logistical operation in between China and the rest of the world, for example. So it's a processing zone, and it's hard to get a good picture of that captures the extreme level of productivity in this Hong Kong port, but absolutely amazing to see. So you can explore that. All right, now when we talk about export strategy, there's some definite steps that you can take that are listed here. Hire an export management company, or at least an experienced export consultant to hold your hand through the complexities of the paperwork and the regulations. Focus on one market at a time. Enter the foreign market on a small scale so that you minimize any sort of subsequent failure. and recognize that it's going to take time and money and energy, and you're probably going to have to hire more people that are experienced in the task. Remember, it's all about relationships, and you're going to need relationships on the ground with local distributors and potential customers. So hire some local personnel, be proactive about these export opportunities rather than reactive. It's better to be proactive, and consider the option of local production. All right, so with regards to your organisation's readiness to export, we want to consider the internal skills and knowledge and capabilities that you have at hand. Maybe you have to hire in some experience and give your current employee team some training. Maybe you yourself need some training. There needs to be a commitment from the leadership down for this to work. And if that's not there, then maybe your organization is not so ready. So there has to be strong motivation for going international, because it takes a dedicated effort. And the competitive capabilities in the domestic market may not necessarily transfer to the foreign markets. And so you have to be ready to adapt as necessary. And so the product readiness, as well as the organization's readiness, gives an indication of how ready you are to export. Now, there's tools online that you can use. This core tool, the company's readiness to export, is presented by Michigan State University, and it's about assessing your export proficiency. It evaluates your organization's processes and the level of readiness to take those processes and products internationally. So it systematically identifies strengths and weaknesses with regards to exporting. Now, of course, exporting is going to involve money and financing, and you have to be able to trust somebody, maybe somebody that you've never met, never seen, who lives in a foreign country, speaks a different language, and abides by a different legal system. And, you know, if all goes wrong, then how do you find this person if they default on an obligation? And so there's standards in place for exporting processes, and these standards are sometimes culturally defined. So if you're an American exporter, for example, you want the importer to pay for the goods before you export the goods from your shores. That's probably what the American organization prefers. But if you're shipping to France, for example, the French importer wants the American exporter to ship the goods before they pay for the goods. They want to receive the goods and then pay. So one way around these cultural preferences is to use a third party, such as an import-export bank. So there's a process to it. In the first instance, the importer obtains the bank's promise to pay on behalf of the importer. Next step, the bank promises the exporter to pay on behalf of the importer. Then the exporter ships to the bank a promise to pay, and the bank pays the exporter. From there, the bank gives the merchandise to the importer, and the importer pays the bank. So by using a third party, we can build into the system checks and balances. There's also distinct languages, a distinct language and jargon associated with importing and exporting. A letter of credit is a statement by the bank that they will pay a specific sum to the exporter upon presentation of the documentation. So the letter of credit is issued by the bank at the request of the importer. And organisations are likely to trust reputable banks, but of course there are fees involved. Another important document in the export-import financing process is what's referred to as a draft or a bill of exchange. It's normally used to affect payment in international transactions, and it indicates a specific amount to be paid at a specific time. It's used to settle the transactions, the trade transactions. So in domestic transactions, the buyer can often obtain possession of the merchandise without signing the formal document acknowledging their obligation to pay. But international transactions, this payment or a formal promise to pay is required before the buyer can obtain the merchandise. A sight draft is payable on presentation to the drawee. A time draft is the same thing, but there's a delay. It's a future date. So when a time draft is drawn on and accepted by the bank, it's called a banker's acceptance. When it's drawn on and accepted by the business, then it's called a trade acceptance. And these are negotiable instruments. A bill of lading has three purposes. It can act as a receipt, it can act as a contract, and it can act as a document of title. And it can also function as collateral against which funds may be advanced to the exporter by the local bank before or during shipment and before payment by the importer. This graphic here is giving you the 14 steps associated with a typical international trade transaction. So let's just walk through those steps. So in the first instance, the importer orders the goods. The exporter agrees to fill the order. The importer arranges a letter of credit, and if that importer happens to be French, for example, then the Bank of Paris sends a letter of credit to the Bank of New York. Okay, then the Bank of New York informs the exporter that they've received the letter of credit, and the goods are shipped from the American exporter to the French importer. Then the exporter presents the draft to the bank, and the Bank of New York presents the draft to the Bank of Paris. Bank of Paris returns the accepted draft, and then the exporter sells the draft to the bank. The bank tells the importer that the documents have arrived, and the importer pays the bank. And the last step is that the Bank of New York presents the matured draft and gets the payment. So can be complex, but it's a standard 14 steps of transactions involved. Okay, I mentioned before the Export-Import Bank, and this bank assists in financing US exports of products to support US employment and market competitiveness. So the Export-Import Bank supplements private capital lending with various loans and loan guarantee programs. They also lend dollars to foreign borrowers for use in purchasing US exports. You can insure your credit. The lack of a letter of credit exposes the importer to the risk that the foreign importer is going to default on the payment. And so the exporter can actually buy insurance against this possibility by buying export credit insurance. And typically this is provided by an association known as the Foreign Credit Insurance Association. So you have to, insurance providers might, if they're members of the FCIA, then you can get this export credit insurance. Okay, Countertrade. Countertrade is all about the trade of goods and services for other goods and services. It's an alternative means of structuring an international sale when the conventional means are difficult. So it's a barter-like agreement and includes, for example, on the link that I've given you here, and, Pepsi engaging with Russia and trading their concentrate for even things like vodka, tomato paste, and warships. So Countertrade is popular because it enables you to get around some barriers. It's popular for developing nations because they lack the foreign exchange reserves required to purchase necessary imports, such as Russia, for example. And world trade covered by some sort of countertrade agreement grew from 2 to 10% a decade ago to about 20 to 25% currently. Okay, there's different types of countertrade. Barter, which is a direct exchange for this good for that good between two parties without money being exchanged. A counter purchase is a reciprocal buying agreement. We'll buy this from you if you buy this from us. And then another option of countertrade is an offset agreement. And essentially, this is a barter arrangement where sales by the exporting country are conditioned on its purchase of items from the importing country. And I've given you a link to a Reuters story there about Brazil purchasing jet fighters from Saab in Sweden. And part of that offset agreement was that Saab must do at least partial assembly in Brazil with a domestic Brazilian manufacturer. Okay, then we can talk about switch trading. So the use of specialized third-party trading houses in a counter-trade agreement, and buybacks, an agreement to accept a percentage of a manufacturer's output as payment for contract to build a plant. Now, there's pros and cons of countertrade, and so we need to know our way around. The advantages of countertrade is that firms would normally prefer to be paid. Sorry, the disadvantages of countertrade is that firms normally prefer to be paid in hard currency. And countertrade may involve the exchange of poor quality goods that can't otherwise be disposed of profitably. So you might not be getting a good deal with the old countertrade. But countertrade is attractive to large, diverse, multinational organizations that can use their worldwide global network of contacts to dispose of goods that might be acquired in countertrade. All right, and there you go. That is, oh, we forgot the pros. Okay, the advantages. The advantages of countertrade is that it can give your organization a way to finance an export deal when other means are not available. And a countertrade agreement might be required by the government of a country to which you're exporting your goods and services. So countertrade can actually be a strategic marketing weapon. And that's a nice point to end on. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you again soon.